All right, welcome to our Friday Flex. This is your hosts, Keith and Joseph, and I hope that you're all having a wonderful day. So as you all remember, last week we were talking about sound vibrations and mental maps. So where is your mental map taking you? I know for those that remember, our mental map is our destinations, locations, memories, impressions that have been placed in our minds and our bodies, and without properly updating the map system, then we will run into the same blockage, same traffic that we normally always run into. So hopefully your mental map has been upgraded, or you're in the process of upgrading your mental map. And so let's get back into, we were talking about modalities last week as far as like the touch, taste, hearing, seeing, and sound. I don't think I'm doing sound. Okay. So Joseph, please give some more depth as to the modality of sound and the effects and so forth.
Sound, of course, we hear things all the time. And as we were discussing last week, that it's not like you can just flip a switch and stop your ears from hearing. So we're constantly receiving information through our ears, the process of hearing all the time. And so I wanted to briefly mention the power of sound. One very quick example to give that many of us may be familiar with, especially on those science TV shows, how they talk about sound and how sound can change your environment. So one example is with a quartz glass or a quartz goblet, and you have the opera singer, and how if she sings the right note and produce the correct frequency, that quartz glass starts to undulate, and then before you know it, it cracks and shatters.
Vibrate?
Vibrate.
I want to make sure. Got a lot of undulation going on. Okay, yes.
So it does this. It starts to change its shape. In other words, so it appears originally as round. If you have any cup in your hand, everyone sees the cup is usually round, but it starts to change shape or undulate and vibrate, and then of course it shatters.
Yeah, this is, I grew up on the east side of Detroit, so, these words like undulate, I didn't learn this in high school. I learned vibrate. I knew vibrate. Go ahead.
And so, again, that's an example that many of us may be familiar with, but let's go a little deeper with that sound vibration. And before, meaning about 2 sessions ago, you were mentioning this aspect of the type of words or the intentions behind the words that we use, and how if we say something that is kind, loving, nurturing, gentle, compared to using harsh, self-defeating words, how a bag of rice, cooked rice, I believe it was, the example that you're given, that the rice that received such warm, loving words did not mold or produce as much mold or decompose in the same fashion as the food or rice that had received harsh words. And so there is some experiments that have been performed regarding sound and water. And of course, in Michigan, we're in Oklahoma, so it's hot here, and there isn't much snow here, but in Michigan, we're familiar with lots of snow. And so everyone is familiar with water freezing in general. We have ice cubes, right? So
And iced tea.
And iced tea. So, one experiment that was performed by one scientist was sound vibration, whether we saying positive, nurturing, loving words, passionate words, or harsh words in relationship to water and how it freezes. And so everyone may be familiar with snowflakes. They have such a beautiful crystallization, arrangement. They're beautiful. So,
And they're all unique, I heard.
and they are unique. There aren't two snowflakes that are exactly alike. So, so as the snowflakes, or shall I say the water would freeze to form those crystalline structures, we call them snowflakes for the lack of better words, okay? When one spoke loving, positive, uplifting, nurturing words, that the snowflakes crystals, the edges were very soft and gentle. But as the words became more intense, meaning either passionate or very harsh, negative, that the edges of those water crystals or snowflake crystals became very sharp, like knives and daggers. And so these bodies are made up of about 80% water. And so if 80% of our body or 75% of our body is water, and if water is influenced by words, harsh words, or even positive, loving words like this, then what to speak of how our own bodies experience that? And many of us may be familiar in terms of just in general, it doesn't have to necessarily be a scientific thing, that if someone says something really harsh or mean to us, our breathing changes, our posture changes, the thoughts that we have. Not everybody, at least I'll put it this way, although I'm from the west side of Detroit, let me make it very clear. My father's from the west side, my mother's from the east side. So don't let this sweet face fool you. Sometimes if someone says something harsh to you, it's not like, oh wow, someone's nice. The first thought that comes to your mind is, I need to see how to shut that person up, right?
Right.
So my point is, our bodies are affected or influenced by what we hear. You gave one beautiful example, which was, you used the word area of opportunity or area of growth.
Right.
When one hears that, your mind, at least myself, I feel like my mind opens up and I start to think, yes, this is an awesome opportunity for making progress, for making growth. But if I use the word, oh, I have weakness, I'm not good at this, I can't do it, I'm not going to amount to anything. If I'm using harsh words towards myself, then it's as if all the energy that I had to do something amazing, it's as if I just lost everything. And I feel defeated and deflated and unenthusiastic. But just simply by taking the word weakness, failure, I made a mistake, instead of using these harsh words and say an area of opportunity, an area of growth, now I just put the power back in my hands. Now I can actually do something amazing. And all that energy, even, it's so crazy, even just saying it in this conversation right now, like, I actually feel like, I can feel the power. I feel like Carlton, when Carlton received the Black Book from Will Smith. Oh, I can feel it. But it's true, like, you can actually really feel like your body becomes enthusiastic, your muscles start to relax. Now the oxygen is flowing through your body. Your whole hormone system or your chemical makeup isn't as toxic. You know, when we have that negative thought and negative vibration or energy going through us. And so that's how powerful sound is. That you can say something that can make someone smile, and especially with the intention. When we put our mind, like what is that saying? Where the mind goes, the energy flows. And so if my thoughts and if my mind and my intentions, shouldn't have done that. Hopefully I didn't disturb anything there. If my thoughts of my mind and intentions are positive, loving, and nurturing, just think of the effect that I can have on another person's life when I say certain words to someone.
Right.
And how instead of that person feeling defeated or devalued, how that person feels, wow, I feel appreciated. I feel, important. I feel valued.
Right.
And it changes the workplace. It changes your relationships with family members, friends, people that you're just meeting off the street. Even if you're selling anything down the street, like if you have a table and you're selling books, or if you are selling anything, saying a few nice words to somebody changes everything.
It's like it knocks down, or
those walls,
destroys barriers. You can see somebody that's walking and they seem agitated, but you say, those are some nice shoes, or nice, find something of value, and they'll immediately, almost as if like awoken, they'll stop.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I'll give you a perfect example, super quick. This is before I moved here, and it's during the time when your dad used to visit me at my job. I used to work for Toyota, and so worked the new and used car lots. And I saw a woman walking through our lot, and on either side of the lot were actually restaurants, like a Jimmy John's or Wendy's or Bob Evans or different things like that, okay? So this lady, which I can easily tell was in a difficult situation in life, homeless. She wasn't, dressed like she was going to buy a car. And I wasn't approaching her. It's like I saw her and I went out there and I approached her, not to sell her a car, just to say hello to her, just to treat her like a human being, When I went out there and I approached that woman, the first thing she said to me was, I'm not here to buy a car. And she was just simply walking by. And I said, I wasn't even trying to sell you a car. I just wanted to simply just say hello to you. When I said that to her, she stopped and she almost cried. Because she was living, in the swamps just behind the dealership. And she was just saying that things have been so difficult in her life, and just for someone to just say hello and treat her like a human being and not look down upon her. She said it actually brightened up her whole entire day. So it's just something that's simple as just saying hello and treating someone with respect and dignity changed their lives.
It changes a lot. And then you think about it from the scientific perspective, since we are made out of 80% water, then by saying something nice to someone, that is having a direct effect on their body.
On their body, yeah.
And saying something negative has a negative effect on someone's body.
Yeah.
And we hear, as a kid, sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt. But actually, they do hurt, because you can't take them back. Once you throw them out there, you can't. It's not like a boomerang. You don't come back. It comes back maybe in fist or something. But it doesn't have the effect of we can just negate it, because any relationship, if you say it without properly thinking about what you're going to say to that person and understanding how that kind of person operates, after you say that whatever it is to them that may not be so helpful or may not be so positive, you may not ever talk to that person again.
Yeah.
I remember in a couple scenarios. One relationship I had when I first moved here, and it was at a time in my life where my mental map that I had was
Classic?
It was classic.
Atari?
It was basic. It was basic.
What's that video game we used to play on the computer called Oregon Trails?
Oh man,
Oregon Trails.
Snake.
Pong.
So this is my processing system. So when something happened, without asking proper questions, without asking intelligent questions, I assumed. I jumped to conclusions. And the person I was in a relationship at that time, like I was a jerk. I was really a jerk. And the person said, I never want to hear from you ever again. And I said, and then years later, I realized, my assumptions weren't really founded. They were based off of my mental maps. Because in NLP, it talks about somebody's perceiving you, what you say and what you do by their own mental maps.
Yes.
And so whatever their past, how they perceive information, how they, whatever they value or they devalue is all in their mental map system.
Yes.
So you can say something, and depending on the upgrade of their maps, you're probably not going to get that best person, or they're probably not going to get the best of you.
Right.
Or vice versa. So there's so many intricacies here when dealing with communication.
Yes.
And how if we don't think before we speak and control our breathing, like you said, someone says something, then we're immediately just
Yeah.
and they're not calm breaths anymore.
Right.
They're very rapid,
Right.
breaths. And therefore we're not able to handle the situation in the most thoughtful, mindful way.
Yes.
And when I used to work at Mathis Brothers, which is a furniture store here, about 15 years ago. And anybody that's in Tulsa that knows Mathis Brothers used to, whoever went in the store knows there's like a whole trail of, let me not say that. It was just a whole a row of sales agents on each side of the store when you come in.
Just lined up, just
lined
like
up,
that. Wow.
Just ready to meet you at the door. And so what would happen is as soon as you come in, we as a salesperson, you have to greet them.
Yes.
And a lot of them have been there before. So they throw up the Heisman, the stiff arm.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah. And so they throw up their arm and can I help? I'm not interested. I'm not going to buy. Or all these rebuttals.
Right.
And some people, they're really mean.
Oh yeah.
Some people, you guys are scum. You guys are like the lowest of species of people. And after a while, you don't even want to approach people because this is what you're hearing.
Yes.
And for someone who has a outdated mental map, they're not going to see what that person is really trying to say. They're going to see they're going to hear what they say and react based off of it.
Yes.
They're not going to take another step thinking this person's probably had a bad day. This person who's come in before has probably had not such a good salesperson who was really aggressive,
Right.
and they're not thinking about these different things.
Yeah.
And so at that time, I wasn't so much in personal development. I wasn't so much into NLP and mental maps. So I would take what was said to me to heart. Oh, you guys are, you're no good.
Wow.
And so I would back off, which is what they wanted.
Right.
It was they got their goal. And so, but here's what happens with time is that they'll walk around the store and then they'll have a question. And then normally they're a little more relaxed.
Yeah.
And then you can come in, how can I help you? And then you meet a different person 10 minutes later, 5 minutes later than you met at the front.
Very true.
And sometimes those people, after they calm down, could be some of the nicest people in the world.
Yes. That is also a fact.
And for me, it took me some time, and I thought to myself, how is it that this person I met 5 minutes ago is so mean, so cruel? And then 5 minutes later, thank you so much for helping.
Yeah.
And it's a completely different person.
Yes. Yes.
And so I realized that sometimes you have to give somebody more than a first impression. Or you have to allow someone to have room to be themselves.
Yes. Yes.
Because we meet people at different times in their life, where they could have had an accident, or somebody could have died, and you don't meet the real them. You meet the hurt them.
Yes. Yes.
And that hurt them doesn't mean what they say. It wasn't their intentions, but they act that way anyway. And so within communication, there's a lot of things happening. And for someone with a upgraded mental map system, they can be more compassionate.
Yes, that's a fact.
And to those listening, what I'm not saying is let people abuse you. That's not what I'm saying.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Don't let
Don't do
people
that.
abuse
No.
you. And what I'm also saying is be more understanding, learn where people are coming from, that we may not have the ability to perceive or to know what happened before we met them.
That's true.
And then we can allow ourselves to be more mature and say, I know this is probably not what you meant. This is how I perceived it. Let me understand what you really need or what you really want.
Yes.
And then it allows for them to take a deep breath, to stop, to pause. Because we realize once we take that deep breath that, okay. Yeah. I mean, just take a deep breath now. It just feels better.
Yeah.
And then when you're in an exchange or an encounter with someone else, and you allow them to breathe, you breathe yourself, and then you all can communicate from a much higher level of thought.
Yes. Yes. And build a rapport.
Build a rapport.
Yes.
And so this is the responsibility that we have as human beings, because we're an evolved species. We're not animals.
Right.
And so some people say we came from monkeys. I don't see that. But what do animals do? They eat, they sleep, they mate, and defend. That's what animals do. Yeah. And us human beings, if we do not operate from a higher mindset, we're no better than animals, because we're eating, we're sleeping, we're mating, and we're defending. And so we have responsibility, and so if we allow our words to come across without much thought, then we're not going to have the most optimal exchanges in our life on a day-to-day basis. You were talking about the vibration. What was the other word? The
Undulate.
undulate. Undulation.
Undulation.
So we were talking about the undulation. I was thinking there are literally right now scientists are coming up with weapons that are pure vibration. You can direct vibration to completely kill whatever you are channeling that energy to. And I remember I saw this on YouTube. You can don't take my word for it. You can check this out. But there's literally it has a name. I don't know what it's called. But through vibration, you can destroy a target. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it explodes, which would be terrible. But this is the power of sound. This is the power of vibrations. And if we do not properly harness the potential ability of the positive ability, then how are we differentiating ourselves from animals? Yeah. And so it is necessary for us to realize that this sound vibration that we hear, that we have to hear because that's how we speak, is through vibration. And it is our duty. It is our duty to be each other's keeper.
Yes. Yes.
And so that means speaking words, encouraging words, to change their mind or to help their mind, and also to change their body.
Yes.
Because yes, we have on the mental level, someone feels better, but then on physical level, they're also feeling the benefits of kind words.
That's very true. Very true. What is that saying? I cannot remember if it's the law of thermodynamics or energy or so, but an object in motion stays in motion until there is an outside force that comes in and knocks it off its path.
That's Newton, right?
I can't remember real Newton or Rick James. Okay, I'm fooling. It's a scientific thing. I'm sorry. I just can't remember which law it is, but it's like law of thermodynamics or law of motion or something like that. But yeah, an object in motion stays in motion until there's an outside force that comes in and changes trajectory. And it's true. Is that, again, just like you were rightly pointing out, and it's so crazy that scientifically we know these things, but we never apply it in everyday life.
Exactly.
You know, and as you were speaking, I was thinking how the human brain, we have a very beautiful cerebrum, you know, the large portion in the front where we can think, use critical thinking skills and look at things from different perspectives. But then there's also another part of the brain called the cerebellum, very small, about the size of an egg, basically, a chicken egg. And it sits in the back.
I was thinking ostrich, but yeah.
That's a big egg. And also a tough nut to crack. But it sits in the back there of the brain. And so that deals with, for lack of better words, flight or fight response. And so animals have a large cerebellum and a smaller cerebrum. Because for them, again, sleeping, eating, mating, defending, they don't need to really think too much. They just need to either run or fight. Or that looks like food, eat, or sleep, or, you know, what have you.
That looks like it's about to eat me. Run.
or mating season, you know?
Yeah.
But aside from that, they don't need, you know, much in terms of critical thinking skills or anything of that nature. Now, don't get me wrong, you know, you have different primates and they know how to use different tools. Like you'll see, you know, with Jane Goodall pointing out how gorillas or chimpanzees can use a stick to enter into a termite hole and they can pull out termites and eat, you know, termites. So they know how to use tools. But just to be able to think and just like you're pointing out, using sound and how we interact with each other, and to really focus on the relationship that we have with the other person. You know, a lot of times, sometimes when conversations, you know, sometimes you have to think, what's more important? Is the relationship that I have with this person important? And of course, we want to make sure we get our point across clearly, but to what degree is that person and my relationship with that person important? And when we start thinking about that, then we really start thinking about the words that we use, our intention that we put in those words. So then when we're interacting with others, how we can actually strengthen that relationship. Because one thing about human beings, yes, we're social creatures, for lack of better words. And that when I think about our community and the neighborhood and how growing up in Detroit on the west side, where I was born and raised, the playgrounds where I spent most of my days, is that back then, in the 80s and so forth, you had mothers sitting on the front step with their daughter between their legs, and they're doing their daughter's hair, like braiding their hair, or sisters, you know, combing and grooming each other, or this aspect of bonding and connecting, and how having that human interaction, how it actually changes one's life and what they do in the world. There was a scientific experiment. I remember my mother was sharing this with me years ago as well, is that there was a scientific experiment where in one room they had maybe 60 or 50 babies. And in another room, they were all like the same age, another room full of 50 babies as well. And so group A, for lack of better words, those babies were simply given a baby bottle. They were fed, but the doctor or the nurse was not holding the child, was not caressing the child. Just like any parent would hold and smell the baby and play with the baby and feed the baby, it was just only feeding the child, basically acting in a somewhat impersonal way, and just letting the baby just lie there in the crib. But in the other group, we'll just say group B, the nurse would go in, they would, of course, feed the child, but they would hold the child and they'd caress and touch the child. And what the scientists learned in those experiments, and they continued them on as the children started growing up and became adults, is that they saw that the child that did not or was not held and spoken nicely to and, you know, fed and the whole thing all at the same time, there were connections in the brain, so synaptic connections that were not made. And that those babies that grew up, they were more inclined towards criminal activity. They did not progress far in their education, meaning they didn't pursue higher education, like college-wise or anything of that nature. They had low income. Basically, the foods that they ate were of lower quality, you know, foods and so forth, compared to Group B, which those individuals, they were making more money. They had those proper synaptic connections, you know, in their brains and so forth, and the whole just neurological wise speaking, they had more connection. They had better relationships. They were more social. They pursued higher education and so forth. And so it's really interesting how when we actually have, or should I say, put relationships and the other person as being important, and we have those loving interactions, we're bonding and connecting properly, how really it does affect that person and how they go through life. Because we remember those things, little anchors that we put on our maps, right? Wow, this was a wonderful experience. You know, remember this, check, you know. This was not a pleasurable experience. Like, for example, someone going into a furniture store and they had a bad experience with a car salesperson or any other salesperson, you know, they're like, oh, bad experience, not going to go there, you know. So when we, again, put the relationship in the center and we actually really try to connect with another person, it really does improve the overall health of the individual. And by improving each individual health, the home, the neighborhood, the community, the city. So in other words, it starts to spread outward. And so a lot of times, a lot of the world's problems, of course, don't want to get into anything giant here, but a lot of it is if as individuals we can address ourselves, personal development, upgrading our maps so it's not always constantly buffering.
Rerouting.
Rerouting. and if we can address those things again and then work on our relationships with each other, you know, charity starts at home, as they say.
Yeah.
You know, so this is home.
Right.
You know, working personal development, that's home. And then let it radiate outward. And just see how your home, your world, your environment, your life, it just transforms. Goes from dark to light, you know. So the power, just like Captain Planet says, the power is yours. It's all of our responsibility, is what we're saying when we say the power is yours. So we, as human beings are amazing. But we don't use our brain to its fullest capacity or fullest potential. Maybe 20% we may use.
I don't think it's that.
Maybe less. I'm just trying to be kind and generous. I'm not even being conservative right now. But if we actually really utilize our minds, and instead of wearing ignorance as a badge of honor, but if we were to really try to see how to be that much more involved in our own life. A lot of times we just like taking a back seat of our life and just saying, this person's that, you know, is the problem why I can't amount to something. That person's my problem. But if we say, no, the power is actually mine, like the Nutty Professor. Yes, I can. You know? I can. Oh, sure, man. Hercules.
Yeah.
You know, and we can actually really do amazing things now, and then we can leave a lasting impression on today's youth. And so that the next generation will know that, wow, I remember, you know, this person. I actually feel very fortunate that I can think of several individuals who had a major influence on my life as a youth, and I still think about them today. Like, I wonder, you know, like I had Professor, you know, he's a doctor of education in Michigan, Dr. Derek Lopez, when I was in 8th grade. And I remember things that he used to say to us. I remember things, you know, even when I was younger than that, and all the teachers that I had and how they were so caring and supportive. When I think of the classes, like calculus classes that I took at University of Michigan, my professors that really were with me all the way and helped me do amazing things. When I think of Mr. Hafner in high school and how it was, I took an honor geometry class. Initially, I didn't think, I don't know if I'll be able to get this. But because of the professor, the teacher, taking the time with me, it's like, Swift, you got this, you can do this. Just being so supportive. I did amazing in that class, learning how to write English and so forth. I had Linda Halpern. You know, she was amazing, you know, in helping me with English. So that way I really got into reading and writing. So my point is, there are, you know, people that have, when you think of your own life, you think about individuals who have helped you in so many different ways. And in one sense, one of the best ways to show our appreciation, you know, to be grateful to everything that they've done for us, is to utilize those gifts and tools that they've given us and actually apply in our relationship with others and share it and teach others, you know, and uplift other people.
One of the things that you said that really hit home is that, it kind of goes in line with what I was going to say, is that you remember the people that treated you wrongly,
Yes.
and treated you very nicely.
Yes.
And I was thinking about in high school, I had a teacher, really sweet lady. Her name was Mrs. Dobsky. She was a math teacher, and math was not my favorite. Wasn't even. I loathed it, I think. And but this is algebra class too, to be more specific. And I just didn't feel confident. And she would sit with me and help me understand better. And mind you, this was 20 plus years ago. And I still remember her name. And then even further back, there's, if she's listening now, she's probably not listening, I don't know. But she's not my friend on Facebook. Anyway, I was in, I think it was first grade. Her name was Mrs. Arsvold. And I was learning how to write in cursive, right? And somehow or another, when I would make a mark, some letters, I would put a little mark above it, just like a little scratch, unconsciously. And she would say, "What's wrong with you? Why are you doing this? Like, it's like chicken scratch." And I remember thinking to myself, "Oh, I guess I don't have the ability to write properly." But I remember her. This is almost 40 years ago. But we remember these things. We remember the impact of someone's sound vibration having on us. And I think to myself, how can I leave a good impression on someone? How can I build them up? Say something. And to your point, you mentioned it, and I don't want to brush past it, about as a child having touch or contact, which is, as we know, in NLP, a modality.
Yeah. Touching and that bonding that comes from the touch that we have from a loved one, a family like that.
And so, as in a couple weeks or a few weeks or so, my daughter be born, and the doulas and the midwives and the doctors are like, "Hey, make sure that you all hold the baby." They need to have, they call it skin to skin. And to hear what happens when you don't have it. And of course, there's always different variables, but we're talking in general.
Yeah, in general.
Speaking.
Yeah, just in general.
You know, because there's many people that have been raised in very rough, absent parent families, and it turned out great.
My mom.
So there's always exceptions to the rule, I think, is what I'm looking for. But for the most part, in general, the doctors are saying, "Hey, hold the baby, have skin-to-skin contact." And for those who have been hugged and embraced very tightly from someone that really means it, or even if you don't really know the person, but the person hugs you very tight, it's like, oh. And
they really mean it, like it's.
Oh, I feel this.
Yeah.
This.
In a good way. You were like, ew.
But even for that one moment, you feel secure. Yeah. And so our senses are always picking up things. The sense of sight, the sense of feel, touch, hearing, smelling. It's a wonderful thing when we are able to have the best versions of these types of sense stimulation. But unfortunately, society now, and you were mentioning it earlier, is that the outside effect or the outside environment is a extension of what's happening internally from those who have not properly developed their mental maps. And so because there's a lack of development in this sense, we're seeing suicide, we're seeing rape, we're seeing trafficking, we're seeing
drug abuse,
all these things.
All forms of intoxication.
Because those people have not had the opportunity to properly work on themselves.
Yeah.
And so because that is not there, or was not there, what we're seeing is the result.
Yeah.
And so when we were talking about, I was talking recently about how the pandemic for a lot of people forced them to see themselves because you didn't have the external distractions. And it was scary to a lot of people because they didn't know how to really address themselves or to figure out, like, oh, man, I'm really depressed.
Yeah. I'm
really sad. And there was no proper outlet. There was no proper channeling of this needed stimulation. And so for those who are thinkers, it allows them to go deeper in thought. And those who are just reactive, it's like, oh, what am I gonna do now? And so we saw through the pandemic, many people died. And a lot of, they say the only way to change the world is to change oneself.
Yes.
Because it is these elements, these variables, that determine how we see ourselves and how we see the world.
Yes.
And so if we are not properly intelligently discriminating information, we're going to see the world in rose-colored glasses or whatever shade, whatever hue of glasses that you may be wearing. You're going to see the world just like that because that is your vision.
Right.
And it's your vision that determines what your body's responding to or what your mind's responding to.
Yes.
And so I sometimes encounter people that are proud, oh, I was raised in this kind of family and I was taught these things. And I'm thinking to myself, did you ever question that? That sounds really unhealthy. Did you question that?
Probably not.
Of course, I'm not a therapist, but I've had therapy. I'm getting therapy. I'm like, based off of just sound logic. Right. That doesn't sound normal. That doesn't sound reasonable. It doesn't sound healthy. And so people are operating in these old mental maps.
Yeah. Some people feel that an old dog cannot learn new tricks. Some people say that I'm hardwired this way.
Right.
There's no way I can change.
Right.
But as you're pointing out, to inquire and ask questions about our upbringing, the belief system that we grew up in. I remember there is actually a book that came out titled "What Happened to You" with Dr. Bruce Perry, and Oprah Winfrey talks about it as well. And in the book, they point out that from the age of 0 to 60, but let me be very clear, 60 months. So in other words, 5 years. So from birth to the age of 5, just like we were talking about this aspect of touch modality, that as the child's body is developing and the whole neurological system is, spreading throughout their entire growing body, they're storing in everything that they're learning. They're creating their roadmap from what they're seeing from the parents, the community, schools, everything like that. And by the time they reach 60 months, 5 years, everything's more or less crystallized. It's set in stone, for lack of better words. And so in one sense, someone may truly think and believe that, wow, once it's all crystallized, it's in stone, how can it change? But we still have the power through neurolinguistic programming, NLP, through personal development, through therapy, to actually be able to address those issues. Just because we've had certain experiences in our upbringing as we're growing and developing from birth till 5, doesn't mean that that's just the end of it. And again, with those maps that people make in those first 5 years of their life, it's unfortunate that we do see people that are in their 50s, 60s, 70s operating off of that same map that was created back then because they never asked questions. They never tried to understand, okay, what's going on with me, what's happening. And it's true. People, as individuals growing up, those first 5 years, we see a lot. We experience a lot. Taste, touch, smell, all modalities, they're acquiring information all over the place. And we're storing it in our maps, and in our mind, our brain, and so forth. In Vedic culture, we see that the first 5 years of a child's life, they are actually immediately put under the loving care. I'm using that word carefully. Loving care of their mother. So they can get all the skin-to-skin contact as much as possible. So that they learn, in short, they can learn a little bit more about unconditional love or just the warm, loving aspect before they go into school where they're interacting with tons of other kids. Who knows what upbringing other children have, experienced and so forth. But the first 5 years, we see again in Vedic culture how those first 5 years are very important in a child's life in terms of just for growth and development, because that's the map that they're going to have with them. That's that little backpack, when you see little kids go to school and they got a little backpack. We don't realize, but we wear our little backpack with our little tools and our little maps that we got in those first 5 years. We carry that with us for the whole rest of our lives. But we can upgrade.
Right, yeah.
We can upgrade,
In the words of the great philosopher Beyonce, let me upgrade you. So one of the things that you mentioned that I was thinking about, and just the irony, I would say, is that especially on belief systems, we don't really think about if we were raised in a particular country where a certain belief is prominent, more than likely we'll adopt that particular belief system because that is what the environment is determining. And so you have all these, and I'm just not to go too deep into it, but you have these religious fanatics that, oh, this one's wrong and that one's wrong. Like, do you realize if you were born over here, you would probably be the same thing, and they were born over there, would probably be the same thing, and you all be fighting from opposite perspectives?
Right.
And it is, but we never look at the bigger picture. We never critically think. We're critical, but we don't think.
Yes.
And so like those two elements have to be there. Critical thinking versus just being critical.
Yes.
If some of you all have been in relationships where there have been people that are extremely critical, and it's like, wow, I can't catch a break. I'm doing everything wrong.
Yeah.
And
I know what you're talking about.
so then you have people that are they ask good questions, they're mindful, and they really try to understand.
Yeah.
Versus making judgments.
Yeah.
And so this idea of using this human form of life to ask deeper questions, it manifests itself, manifests its importance or displays an importance in different areas of life, especially in communication. So we have to be able to use our mind, sharpen our mind with proper map software. And so, and this is a necessity in which, if we really want to change the world, this is how we do it.
Yeah.
I remember, and I'll say this in closing because we're got a couple minutes left. So, last Friday when we were out at First Friday, I encountered a woman who, she said, "What is this book table about?" I said, yoga, meditation, and so forth. And she said, "I used to do that. Now, what I do now is I do humanitarian work, the real work, you know." She said, "I get about, this whole learning to control anger, but, sometimes you got to fight for, what's right," which is correct, 100% correct.
Yeah, yeah.
But one of the things that was not understood was that if you are not working on yourself, and I didn't say this to her, of course, then you are not having the maximum, the best maximum result that you could potentially have, because you're using your old software to handle a world problem.
There has to be a paradigm shift.
Right.
The mindset software
Yeah.
that we had when the problem started cannot be the same mindset that we have when we look for solutions. So if we have, I'll just say it directly, that to address material problems, we have to step outside and look at it from a spiritual perspective sometimes. Again, that paradigm shift. In order to, again, find solutions. Because if our mentality, blah, 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 mentality, blah, 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 blah. So if, for example, if I think I can chop down a forest with my axe, and I'm going out there and I'm just swinging, I may get down one or two trees, but then I'm not able to make much progress, that means that I need to look back at my axe because it has become dull. And so if I sharpen my axe, then I'll be more effective. So in other words, we as individuals have to take time to retreat. We have to take time to step back. We have to take time to reflect and look at things from different perspectives, sharpen our axe so that we can be more effective in the world. You can ask any chef, what's dangerous or what is most dangerous, a dull knife or a sharp knife? They'll always tell you a dull knife is the most dangerous knife. So personal development, getting back to what you're saying, just emphasizing that we really truly have to work on ourselves if we want to be effective and efficient in this world. Otherwise, we're just part of the problem and not part of the solution.
Because we're out here chopping with dull axes. And you exert more energy.
You exert more energy, you waste time, you waste energy, we're just wasteful.
Yeah.
And that's really, unfortunately, what we see in a lot of different situations or scenarios in the world. Is that instead of addressing the real problem, we want to blame someone else or blame our environment or blame everything else and not really address what's going on here in the heart. You know, that's why my degree is in environmental sciences, because eventually I realized that with all the papers I was writing in terms of ecology and pollution and so forth, I started to realize that my environment is a mirror reflection of my internal environment. And so if I want to improve the ecology and the world around me, I have to clean the ecology or work on the ecology of my heart. I have to clean the environment of my heart. And then from there, I can have a maximum impact in the world around me.
Yes, I totally agree. So for those that are listening now and will listen in the future, please make sure that if you really want to change the world, you got to upgrade your software, upgrade your mental maps, and work on yourself, because that is how we become the well-wisher of everyone, is by making us working on ourselves. So thank you so much, and until next time,
Flexing.
flex on.